Yeah, looks like we just went live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Distilling 101. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. A little cool down here for June. I'll take it. This basement gets a little chilly. Usually, though, it's a little bit warmer. But I'll take chilly over warm any day. What's going on, Steven? What's up, Clint? Good to see y'all. Let me get these links shared while people start trickling in here. Get business taken care of quickly. Got allergies. What the hell just happened? Oh, shit. Okay, got some allergies, so we'll probably be sneezing a little bit tonight. Hopefully, I won't be too loud in everybody's ear. That time of year. Usually get it in the spring and in the fall. So we'll be all right. Let me get all the links out while everybody's coming in. Won't take me but a few minutes. A few minutes longer than it should take. Go through my list here. Hopefully I'll get a share more. I don't know. Let's see what kind of weekend it's going to be. I wish I could just click them all and share it once. Man, my nose is itchy. A few more. Then they'll put the brakes on me. Just a few more. Bear with me. Gotta do this first every time. And I hate introing this way. Let's see how many of these I get. I went to see the Mandalorian and whatever, the new Star Wars today. It's pretty good. Had a pretty good time. Took in my daughter and we all went. It was pretty good. Loud. They crank it up, man. They got them subs that you can feel the rumble. I like it that way, though. It's oh, man. They cut me way back. I didn't even get that far today. Damn. Yeah. Okay. Damn, I can't believe I didn't get that one in. It's a lot fewer than usual. A couple fewer than usual. Hopefully I get to share them all. Hell, sometimes when it does that, I don't get to get them all out there. Oh, well. It's going to see Shine. Good to see you, brother. Hope y'all having a good weekend. What's up, Patty? Just got the first coat, a base coat on the Honda. I got a few more coats. Oh, hell, you busy, man. Multitasking. How the hell can you paint, grill, and chat? That's a lot. So you got to wait so many minutes for it to get tacky before you can put on the next coat. What's going on, Michael? Good to see you, brother. What's up, Curtis? Good to see you. Good to see y'all. Base coat. Okay. First time I putting the base coat. So when you put a base coat on, do you let it dry in wet sand, or you already past that point, or I don't know if everybody does it that way, or is this kind of the priming stage, or the first coat of actual paint over the prime? I appreciate you. Yeah, 807. It won't take long. I didn't get to put them all out there. Not very many at all. Hopefully, I'll get to share the rest of all of them. A lot of times when it stops me that soon, I can't. I won't be able to get them all shared out. But, oh well, get as many shared out as we can. So hopefully we'll get some questions in here tonight, some newbies. I see. Yeah, I've never done any painting like that. You know, it's most of the painting I've ever done been with a rattle can. To be honest with you, I've watched them do it on a lot of custom car shows and a lot of that stuff, and I always thought it was pretty cool, and having the paint bays and all the lights and keeping it dust free and keeping the trash out. It's hard to do, I'd say. Keeping bugs and everything else out from flying and getting into everything. That's cool. What color you painting it? I always thought, man, if I did custom painting, I'd have to do just better than candy apple. I love that candy apple, and that candy apple green looks pretty good too. I always like that paint that has a little bit of a different color underneath it. But I know that shit's expensive. Those cans are pretty expensive, I'd say. But what they charge to paint a car these days, man. I mean, Earl Schwab, $199 or 10,000 custom job plus. Oh yeah, it's tough, man. Yeah. I'd say it's pretty tough to keep everything filtered out and keeping the air clean and bugs out and dust, keeping all the dust out. Shoot. Definitely going to have to get me a new chair, man. I keep thinking about that. Have to get online and check them out. Definitely need a new chair, though. Oh, that's about like the one I got. Actually, it looks like that. I think that is the one I've got. No, it's a little different. A little bit different. 29 for that one. Damn. I like the sound of that. Those look cheap as shit, though. Those look pretty nice. So it's 29 or 129. Not a whole lot in between. There's a gaming chair. It looks pretty slick. 79. That ain't bad. 79.89. I was looking at some the other day, man, and I'm glad I read the width was 19 inches between the arms, and I'm like, 19. That seems a little bit small to me, man. I broke out the tape measure. It's like, man, you'd have to be an e-girl or some little Chinese, but 19 inches, no way, man. I mean, that's a kid's chair. Oh yeah, yeah. Just overspray. Every time I've always painted, I tend to overspray. But with car painting, it's just multiple coats. Of light, real light, going over it each time, and just multiple coats to make sure you get it all, but not too much where you get a run or a drip. Yeah, yeah. I used to. There was well, I did spray one down. It was actually as a boat, and I sprayed that stuff. I guess they put on. It's a two-part, kind of like an epoxy, and I sprayed a boat. Oh, damn, that was 30 years ago. It was a DuPont Imron. Does that sound DuPont Imron? I think that's what it was. Yeah, it's IN. Okay, Imron. Two-part urethane enamel. Yep, that's it. That might just be for fiberglass. I don't know if that's for marine and aviation commercial. Look, did a pretty good job. I had a little Wagner power sprayer, one of them old home jobs. I didn't do too bad considering what a shitty sprayer it was, but it was pretty light bodied stuff. It wasn't thick, like a house paint. DuPont Imron. You ever used any of that clip? I don't even know what that costs. Let me see if I got a. I think I paid $150, $200 back then. Let's see what it cost. Well, yeah, they want you to log in. Probably the only way you can get it these days, I guess. You gotta. Oh, here we go. Oh, that ain't too bad. Yeah, I don't think it's gone up any in price. Huh. Really ain't gone up much at all. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it did well on the boat instead of the clear coat and gel coat and all that. I just sprayed that Imron on it. It looked pretty good. Probably should have just gel coated it, but That boat's long gone. I got another one I need to sell. Needs work, a lot of work. Need to get it out of here. I'm not going to be able to use it. Might get me a little John boat or something, but yeah, it's a big old, huge center console I used to take out in the ocean, scuba dive and fish out of when we go down in the Keys. Shit, I've been so far out in the ocean you couldn't even see land in any direction, just using a compass for navigation. My GPS wasn't even working at the time. Just having to allow for the Gulf Stream movement, and trying to vector off that. I did pretty well considered. Are they? What's going on, Irish? What's up, brother? Drinking some mead. You've been talking about that mead. How'd it turn out? Pretty good. I still ain't run my vodka yet. My damn column, I got a broken globe. So I gotta deal with the return on that. If I can. So I may just run it through my old column with the deflag and get it all broken down and stored and do a final run later when I get my column in. Just strip it all out now. Get that fermenter out of my way. Run that apple, do that second run on that apple. I need to add some spice to it for apple pie. So I have to add a little cinnamon, nutmeg, and a few spices. Infuse a little bit. What's going on, Bear? Good to see you, man. Yeah, that cinnamon goes a long way. How's it going, Bear? Yeah, especially if you throw it in while it's just after post flavored, it still goes a long way. But when you put that cinnamon in an infuser, a thumper, or something like that, oh man, you wouldn't believe how strong it gets. All right, got you, brother. Well, that's good, man. A lot of people kind of just listen in, so glad to have you, brother. Maybe some people ask some questions that you'd be curious to know. We're starting to get some people trickling in. Oh, with the yeast, yeah. With the cinnamon, I tend to add that after fermentation. Especially like in meads or anything really. Cinnamon's kind of a antimicrobial, and it can kill the yeast and it can stress yeast. So a lot of times, certain spices are okay to throw in there early, but cinnamon and there's a few others that. And even, well, I guess even honey, itself is kind of a antimicrobial too. So, so that's so much for that. So I guess there might be why there's some special yeasts that work a little bit better with meads. Maybe they acclimate it to that, be a good question to ask Amanda and Al if we can get them on here. When? Yeah, I try to just, that's why a lot of people, want to use their copper to, ferment in, and copper's not good to ferment in either because it's got antimicrobial properties as well. Well, I mean, after the fermentation's done and before you rack, you can add it in, or after you rack, you can, add it in, but definitely before bottle. You don't want to bottle it in there because it works pretty quickly. Just best just to put it like in a tea bag, or and or you can make a tea bag and a little brew bag or coffee filter, and with a clothespin or whatever, kind of just let it sit in there. I like using coffee filters like that. Just kind of fold it up and put it. It's round, so you just fold it in a little triangle, put it in the bottom of the cup, and then tie the top with a string, and just let it sit in there and steep, and it'll help keep a lot of the stuff out of there. Yeah. No, that boat's the only thing I ever sprayed. I forgot about that till I thought about it. I used that Wagner power sprayer outside and, spraying wood, and I sprayed that boat down with it. But, for fences and shutters and backside of a house, it worked out pretty well. They're not too bad. I didn't use it inside a lot. I tried it on some. I guess I did some inside walls with it, but you got to keep it pretty thin. It sputtered a lot, and it's more headache than it's worth. I ended up having to roll it after I sprayed it half the time anyway. Yeah, yeah. Yeast will definitely kill some of the yeast. That's why I think maybe some certain yeast specific to yeast. I mean, certain yeast specific to meads might be acclimated to the honey a little better, because once you use it and they develop kind of an immunity to it, or you get the ones that survive are the ones that are dominant enough to survive it. But yeah, you don't want to ferment in copper. And I guarantee you a lot of like the D47 is probably a resistant strain or something been acclimated. Paying a lot. So you got your electric on? Good deal. Awesome. Yeah, I've got to get all my stuff built. Definitely need to get up there and see Wes and Phil and get that thing built and I got to do a little research on it. Well, I sure like it when these pages give you the option of a dark background versus a light background. I hate that bright white. I don't see the option on this page. Let's see here. So you got your electric run out. So if I remember right, you were only able to run what'd you run, 10-2 out there, 12-2? Running 10-2, you can at least get 30 amps out of 10-2. That's probably the most efficient would be to run 10-2 for the cost wise. Anything less than that, it goes up pretty quickly in price. But with a 10-2, yeah, it'll definitely take moisture out of the air too. Yeah, it definitely will kill yeast, and so will the cinnamon. So you got to be You got to be careful with it. I just wonder if D47, let me do a little research on that. Yep. Yeah, Lalvin D47 is widely recognized as one of the best and most popular yeast strains for fermenting honey, making mead, but it requires specific acclimation. That's what I was talking about, acclimating your yeast to it. Honey must have a very high osmotic pressure, making proper rehydration with warm water and products like Go Firm Vital to acclimate the yeast to prevent a stalled fermentation. Go Firm Vital. Now, that is something I have not dealt with before, so we're going to try. I'm glad I looked. Go Firm Vital. It sounds like something Firm Solutions putting out. Lallemand, okay. Go Firm. Yeast hydration nutrient is a natural micronutrient supplement added to water during the yeast rehydration step. Developed to reduce sluggish or stuck fermentation, it fortifies yeast with essential vitamin biotin. I'll talk about those. Pantothenic acid, minerals, magnesium, zinc. Definitely magnesium, zinc is a must for fermentation too. We talk about that. The sterols. Interesting. I've not Go Firm Protect. So it helps get it acclimated in your yeast. But yeah, also using a yeast, save the yeast that you use with your meads, because every time you use that, you're selectively saving yeast that survive the mead, the process, the honey itself. So probably more, stronger, more virile yeast is going to survive that in the lees. So if you keep reproducing those and using them again and again, it's definitely going to acclimate and kind of looking for the word. It's what's the term for that? In my mind again, but there's a scientific term for it I'm trying to think of, but it's just kind of like natural selection. It's like what you do when you're bringing up seeds. It's the strongest, throw away the weakest, and keep the strongest, and keep using the stronger, more virile. And that's basically what they did with corn. Corn used to be a grass with look like that mini corn that you see, little tiny mini corn. That's what the earliest corn looked like. It started out as a grass, but each time through selective breeding, and I can't remember what the scientific term is, but they would just keep the strongest and the best and discard the rest, and they would keep breeding that over and over and over again. And as they did that, it's natural selection. You get the strongest, and you keep continuing to do that. And it kept getting larger and larger. Those little teeny mini corns kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger till you got to full size. Now they got corns that are like 2 foot long, but I don't know what kind of eating, they are. But yeah, kind of almost like an evolutionary thing, but it's different than evolving. It's acclimation, but there's a term for it, but I can't remember it. But that's what you want to do with your yeast, is just kind of, each time you keep using that same yeast and keep, introducing it each time. Boy, my nose is itching like a hair just tickling my nose right now. I hate it. God, it drives me nuts. Oh. And I keep looking to see if it feels like a mustache hair is curling up, but it's not. It's just my allergies, but that's about what it feels like. Nothing drives me more. Yeah, kind of adaptation. So it adapts, each time, and so you selectively breed that yeast that survives and keep breeding that and keep using it over and over and over again and yeah, kind of evolution adaptation, but I can't. Yeah, let me go the damn term. Yeah, natural selection. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's all. Yeah, evolution adaptation. We'll have to go with that. That's not the word I'm looking for. Evolutionary. I think everybody gets the gist, though. Sucks. Losing words, man. What's going on, Mud Grip? Good to see you, brother. What's going on, Hellbilly? Yeah. It's they've done that with a lot of different yeasts, and you can it's a good thing to do. That's really how they've taken like bread yeast and stuff and adapted it for different uses in alcohols and wines. We touch on it a little bit, like the wines. Your wines tend to get pretty acidic, and you don't really want to use baking soda or anything like that. You want it to get acidic. Actually, I add acid blend to my wine fermentations to create more acids, and so they acclimate those yeasts in more acidic environments. And it's good for more than one reason. It's good for the yeast to be able to adapt to that, but having that acidic environment keeps the bacteria loads down, right? So yeah, selective breeding, evolution, adaptation, but there's a scientific word for it. I can't come up with, but it's not that critical. But yeah, everybody knows what I'm meaning. But it's kind of an evolution, selective breeding, adaptation, um, natural selection kind of thing. What's going on, Brian? Good to see you, brother. What you up to, Mike? Good to see you, man. So, a lot of these, you know, especially like for the wine. So you'll get those for a low acid. So those are considered better for wine. For alcohols like what we do. For a lot of grains and stuff. Um, adapting it for alcohol tolerance. Because we don't really, and working off fast. So something like that can adapt for a faster fermentation. So, wilder yeast tend to work off fast, but they don't have that tolerance. So you start sometimes with some wild yeast and acclimate it for that alcohol tolerance, like we talk about. Every time you ferment, start low with like a beer, like a 6% ferment, and then work on up to 8, and then a 10, and then a 12, and before you know it, you've got something that can handle 10, 12, 14%, like what we generally deal with. The EC 1118 being 18%, it'll finish off pretty much anything dry unless you get to 1.020 or something, get up there really high. And so that works out pretty well. And, you can basically acclimate your yeast to conditions that for certain, fermentation. So it's a lot of experimenting to do with that. And especially when you start getting expensive yeast, and doing the same thing over and over and over a lot. If you do this pretty much the same things, acclimating that yeast to your fermentation will definitely help. I saw some in one of the groups today. I don't know. that's where some of these people get started, and I wish they would start here because they could definitely, you know, lessen their issues and run into less stumbling blocks. But this fermentation was stuck. It hadn't even hardly started, and it's been several weeks, and the pH was 1.1 something, is like way down, man. It wasn't going anywhere. And it's just, it had lactic acid on it, lactobacillus, and it's just that's going nowhere, man. He didn't use his oyster shells, and it was a wash. I don't know where his lacto came from, but yeah, it was a sugar wash, and probably way overdone. Probably, a 20+% alcohol start, which is probably way too high. No oyster shells, probably no nutrients. Just, you can't just throw it in there and expect it to do anything without taking care and learning, and even the most simple of them. Yeah, EC 1118 is a champagne yeast. It's a Lactobacillus ex bayanus. It's a champagne yeast, and it's pretty good for about everything. Like we say, if you wanted to buy one yeast, that'd probably be the one to get. But if you do a lot of grains, it works fine for grains. It's a very neutral yeast. It allows whatever you're fermenting to come through. It's not going to add a lot of floral notes. It's not going to create a lot of extra esters, and it's kind of low flocculent. So you don't have a huge, yeast bed, which is, preferable with wines and champagnes. But for flavor, it's kind of neutral. It's not going to impart a lot of flavor. It's not going to give you a lot of esters for your floral notes and a lot of things like that. It's just pretty good for just a neutral when you want the grain or the fruit or whatever you're fermenting to come through, and without, creating a lot of esters and other things for flavor outside of what the fruit is. It's pretty decent for that. But it's probably the best at nothing, I don't know. I guess it's probably one of the best at, restarting a stuck fermentation. That's about what it's best at. But it's adequate. It's good or very good for most everything, but it's best for probably nothing but a stuck fermentation. Yeah, it's definitely a workhorse. It's definitely good, and it finishes dry. So if you want something dry and it's got quite a bit of alcohol, it will definitely finish dry unless you put way too much, unless you start out with way too much sugars. That's awesome, Frank. Yeah, my vodka's ready to run too. I'm going to have to run it and put it and store it until I can get another column in. My column came with a broken globe, man. This is the last one I reached in to get out. I'd already had 3 stacked up and ready to do the last one and put it all together. And I reached down there and that bag was just crumbling. I was like, no. So, yeah, it'll be fine. But if you want to, you can rack it off into another container and get that yeast bed out and salvage the yeast, clean it up, rinse it out with water real good, stir it up, agitate it, and rinse it with some fresh, clean water, and let that settle out, and then rack off that water and do it again with some more fresh water, and then save that. Oh, potatoes ready. Well, damn, Mike, when did you go into the ground with them? Yeah, I was asking earlier about that. I've bought a bunch of potatoes for that mash, and a few of them have started creating little eyes and little growth off of it. Most of them are still pretty good. I've got a few onions in a bag that are starting to do that as well. But I've never done potatoes like that. I've always just bought them. But I was curious if how much potato, to cut off. We talked about that. So that's amazing how to grow a bunch of tomatoes or potatoes. But I don't know if I'll use the dirt and the straw, or if I think I'll just try to use dirt alone. And have you ever done them in pots, or is it best to have it in the ground? 60 to 90 days. So you planted them in March. Yeah, well, nutrients wise, you definitely don't want to over nutrient. That's one of the worst things you can do besides not add any, right? So definitely want to stick to that for sure. And using the right yeast, yeah, and step feeding it. Absolutely. They're finding out more and more about step feeding it. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. It's just, a lot of people want to do that. They'll do they want to get 18, 20% and 1.2 and it's just, after they realize, most people do that and try to get that high octane proof, high proof. And once they do that, unless they're trying to make a vodka, which is perfectly fine if you're shooting for vodka, but they're just shooting for high proof, whatever. And they're making it hot as they can get it and fiery. And it's, you proof it down, it's still hot and it's just not that good. But once they, start doing all grains and other things, then they start realizing, wow, this is really flavorful and smooth and easy to drink. And, it might not come off at 190, but 140 and 30 and proof down is just so smooth. And yeah, they've some figured out, some never do. Some will shoot for that high sugar shine, high output, high octane, high proof, and they don't mind that fire. Some people expect it when you get moonshine. That's the reputation that it has because that's the tendency for people to push it that hard. But when you push it that hard, man, you get so many off flavors, and it's just not that good. Oh, so you plant it before the final frost? That's interesting. Growthly with Jenna. Is that on Facebook? YouTube. Okay, cool. I'll pull that up right now and check it out. Yeah, we'll check her out. 213,000 subscribers, man. She's got pretty good. She must know her shit. We'll check it out. I got it open up. I'll check her out sometime. Potato berries, which makes a genetic variety so I can quit for new qualities, including different. Yeah, Fermento is really good. Right. Yeah. Fermento is basically yeastals. It's basically dead yeast, and it's a little bit more expensive, but probably one of the best you can use. But you can save a lot of money if like we talk about taking that yeast bed in the bottom. The downside of that is whenever you use it, you're going to use the yeast that's there with it, right? So it's not just unless you want to boil it up. You can mix it in a saucepan and just keep stirring it up and boil that and kill everything in there and make you some fermento with it. And then you can use it with anything, right? And it doesn't have to be boiling. 180 is plenty fine, for 5 or 10 minutes at 180 is fine. It doesn't have to be boiling. 180 is going to kill most everything in there that's going to be an issue. And, just make sure you put it in a sanitary, clean jar like canning, if you want to keep all the bacteria and lacto and a lot of other things out of there that you don't want to spread. That's kind of why they clean boil these jars. Everybody thinks it's all about botulism, and it is. So of course that's another one. But yeah, it's definitely other things as well. When anything growing in there. But so you can kind of make your own fermento. And I know buying the fermento is a little bit more expensive, but it's definitely the best. And yeah, it's easy to overdose or easy to dose with the fermento because it's just basically dead yeast holes, and you don't have that like the DAP and the urea and all that to deal with, and adding too much, because with DAP and a few others, Fermax, you definitely don't want to overuse it. Definitely, got to use it. And a lot of people don't step feed, and a lot of people don't use it when they really need to. They think, oh, there's plenty of nutrients. This is a vegetable. This is a plant. There's plenty of nutrients. It's like, for a human, maybe, might be getting some of what you need, but you got to get yan and fan, yeast assemblable nitrogen and free amino nitrogen. And if you're not getting that, you know, it can have a lot of the other, like the biotins I was talking about earlier, and a lot of, the zinc. So there's a lot of things like everybody talks about using the tomato paste as a nutrient. Well, it has a lot of things in there that are supplemental and great, like the biotins and the zinc and other nutrients that are very beneficial. But what it's lacking is yan and fan. So if you want to use that as a supplemental, that's fine. But as a primary nutrient, it's just not there. So, but yeah, the yeast holes, the fermento, really good stuff. And you can make that, like we were talking, the yeast, get that yeast bed out and rinse it, get all the alcohol out of there, and kind of, keep adding water and stirring it up, and run it through a sieve, to get out all the organic matter, all the little grain holes and whatever, fruit seeds, whatever you're fermenting, get it all out of there, and just write down on the jar, what fermentation it came out of. And next time you do that, that brandy or that bourbon or whatever, grain or fruit or whatever you do again, you can use that same, and it'll be complementary, and you'll be acclimating that. So if you want to save the yeast, you can. And if you just want to make nutrient out of it, you can do both. You can get a couple of jars, because there's going to be a lot of, a big yeast bed in the bottom, and you can save that. It's very beneficial. It saves you a lot of money. Yeah. Yeah. Too much nutrients is not good. Turbo yeast is one of the, yep. 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 And they had dextrose to it as well, to kind of, to speed up fermentation, and to kind of feed it and let it get it going good. So you're getting a mixture of nutrients, dextrose, and yeast all combined. And I don't even know what base yeast they use. Yep. Did you Vapor 18 pot for the element and for the drain? Cool. Yeah, use if you can use silicone, that's good, because it won't break down. Nylon, there's certain esters and stuff that may work on the nylon. I'm thinking acetone and ethyl acetate may work on the nylon a little bit. So if you can, what did it put it at an angle you couldn't go straight in with your drain? You can also have it braised. You can take it in and have somebody braise it. Well, for grains, you really don't need a lot of nutrients, especially with the malts. With malts, that's a nutrient, right? So a lot of your malted grains will have a lot of the N and FAN and nutrients that you're going to need, zinc and botans and all the, there's certain supplemental things that would be good. Like, for example, if you're just doing corn, um, a lot of people don't realize it, but just corn alone doesn't have 100% what it really needs, but it's high. It's like 75, 80 some percent of the nutrients that you need will be there. So you really don't, there's not a necessity for, nutrients, but it certainly, if you're using, Fermo, it certainly doesn't hurt to add it a little bit. And if you're using, like we were talking about, some of your, yeast bed, you can add some of that in there, and it's definitely going to keep the yeast very, very happy. So you got, your own homemade Fermo basically, and that's one of the best nutrients there is. Um, yeah, botulism can live, and it can live at a high temperature too. Let me check the temp first. Um, The hardy spores can survive boiling at 212 degrees and require temperatures of 240 to 250 to be fully destroyed, which is why they pressure can. Pressure canning is like we talk about how increasing the pressure increases the temperature, and that's really about the only way you're going to get water, boiling water to that temperature. Because if it's an open top, you know, open to air, just at one atmosphere, regular air pressure, you're not going to get that hot. So you have to have that pressure cooker to get to that temperature. So, or pressure boiler. So yeah, it takes a really high temperature to kill that. Let's see what proof of alcohol. Yeah, Clostridium botulism spores can survive in practically any alcohol percentage, as alcohol does not destroy the spores. Um, but it does suppress them a little bit. So it will inhibit their growth at 18 to 21%, but it's not going to kill them all. Just like, you know, cooking it at 160, 80, it's going to kill most of your bacteria and a lot of your stuff. But botulism, you got a pressure can. So that's why when you do meats, especially when you're canning meats and things of that nature that are prone for that, you gotta use a pressure canner. If it's just you're canning, um, and you keep everything good and clean, sterile. But if you're canning like fruits and jellies and jams, not to and um, tomato things of high, like tomato stuff, high acid and stuff, it's fine just pressure canning or just canning. But yeah, any kind of meats, man, you really need to have a pressure canner. Yep. And here it says no spore death. There is no standard drinking percentage of alcohol that will reliably kill or inactivate botulism spores. Only intense heat, such as pressure canning 250 degrees, will effectively destroy them. So this takes about 250 and in a little bit of time at that temperature. So definitely want to do that. But yeah, alcohol, it'll suppress their growth, but it doesn't kill it. Good to know. I didn't know that. And let's see. Let's see. Yep, potassium metabisulfate will not kill it either, or its spores. So So it's best for, stopping wild yeast and spoilage bacteria while making food preservation. It is not reliable for an antibotulinal agent. It's really high heat. Well, it's interesting to see that even alcohol, because I would have thought that a certain percentage of alcohol would kill it, and it doesn't. That's crazy. Acidity. Less than 4.6. It cannot grow and produce toxins in highly acidic environments. Like naturally acidic fruits and foods properly preserved with vinegar. So that's what I was talking about, like in your tomatoes where you got a pretty low, acidic level. A lot of those times you can just, regular canning works, or using vinegar helps too. But yeah, acidic environments is really key for killing those. And I think that's one of the good reasons too. One of the reasons why you want to you don't necessarily want to use a lot of baking soda or pickling lime to keep your pH above 5 when you're making wines, especially making wines. Never, ever use any baking soda or pickling lime or anything like that when you're making a wine. You want it to get acidic. It's going to get acidic. That's the part of the process, and that's part of the preservative. That's how your wine can keep for such a long period of time without getting any growth in there, So that's definitely a good thing. Yeah, it'll be fine. Like I say, if worst comes to worst, you can have somebody just weld around it or braise around it. It should be pretty easy. And you can, there's certain fluxes that you can use where you could actually, in solder, but you definitely want to take your valve and all your gaskets and everything out of there when you do. It's going to get really, really hot. So I don't even know if you could take your gaskets out of it and your O-rings and stuff. Yeah, and distilling, it's very beneficial. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to do that in a wine or a beer. But yeah, for distilling, yeah. And it's good for nutrients. So, if you want to take that out, boil it up and save it, it's basically the same thing as a Fermo, dead yeast holes. Nah, I'd say it'll be fine, Patty. Yeah, I mean, propagating yeast like that is actually, I mean, even maybe in some wines and beers, you can do it. Definitely in grains, it's and it just depends on what you're doing. Bread yeast, yeah, killing bread yeast. Yeah, Clint's making fun of somebody else's autocorrect. Yeah. Yeah, it should be. It'd be probably one of the best ways to do it, man. Just braise it and forget about it. Don't worry. That way you won't have to always wonder if it was tight enough. I might have a little beer juice somewhere in all this mess. Uh, yeah. But yeah, it inhibits its growth, but it doesn't kill it. That's what I got out of it. I figured that at a certain percentage, above like 80 or 100 proof, 50% or so would kill it, but it doesn't kill it, but it does inhibit its growth, which is a good thing. But I would say, what we do doesn't introduce a lot of, botulism. I don't know, maybe some of these brisket shines or something like that, and some of these where they use animals in the distillation. You might have to have a long term concern, but most of it, you're not going to have to really deal with a lot of things that are going to contain a botulism or a spore. But I guess they can go about anywhere. So camping, awesome, man. Hope y'all having a good time. Good to see Tex. You're fine. You're fine. We got a few people driving right now, so it's all good. Yeah, acidity's the key, and especially in canning, having below that 4 is definitely key. And then winemaking, when you're keeping wines for 5, 10, 15 years, that's definitely the one of the things. If you had anything in there, any spores at all, it's definitely it's not going to grow. So yeah, never eat anything. Yeah, always on your cans. If the tops are pot, that's why a lot of times the cans have those certain rings in it. It shows that there's still pressure, negative pressure in there. And as bacteria start to grow, they'll respire and they'll bulge the can. So if that can top's bulging and you can pop it by pushing it, don't eat it. Don't feed it to your animals either. Just throw it away. Or if you hate somebody awful lot, maybe invite them over for dinner. Well, the oyster shells aren't going to keep it from getting too acidic, and um, once it's not a big risk in distilling. It's really something that's more of an issue with canning foods and products like that. Generally, with alcohol, I've never heard of any issue at all with botulism in alcohol. Uh, but it's more of a canning, you know. Yeah, if you don't go to work, it's a good day at work, ain't it? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's the reason that they have copper pipes in your home is because it doesn't allow molds and stuff to establish inside the pipe itself. Whereas plastic, if you have the plastic PVC or even the PEX, you can start getting some spotting and some issues. But I mean, it's no different than the city's lines. I mean, the city lines aren't copper anymore; they're all that orange tubing, polypropylene or something. So it's not, it's going to be in those pipes too if it's going to be an issue. But it's a lot better than the galvanized steel of the past. But yeah, a lot of copper. That was why it was always been good because it helps, and it's also easy to solder and work. Yeah, that's why we were talking about last week. When you're using the oyster shells, you want to get your pH below the 5.3 threshold. So you get it down to like 4.3 or 4.5 ish, and then add those. And your pH is still going to drop, and especially in like your washes, which is really what you need. And you don't even really need it as much in a grain, unless it's like real cold and you're using cold temperature lager yeast, and it's going to be a long prolonged thing, and it's definitely something you're going to distill. For beers or wines, you don't need them. You don't want to use your oyster shells for beers or wines. If that's your end product, your goal is an end product of beers or wines, that's not something that you're going to consider. But for your ferments, especially your tequila washes, your sugar washes, anything with a high sugar content tends to create a lot of organic acids. And when you get those, you get that pH drop, which you're not going to be dealing with botulism and those type fermentations anyway. Generally, you deal with a lot of your botulisms when you're pressure canning, and you're just, a lot of people like canning meats, excuse me, and deer meats and other meats like that. And when you're doing that, definitely want to pressure can instead of just pressure cook. You got to have a high temperature. So, but yeah, you want to get it below the acidity level below, and then you bring it up with the oyster shells, and that creates a isotonic buffering solution that will allow the pH to change, but it's going to buffer it to where you're not going to get into the twos, which is going to stress your yeast, but it will hang in the threes instead of allowing you, like the dude I was talking about at the beginning, at a 1.1 pH. That's just not good at all. That's going to be horrible. And he's added baking soda to it, and it's still coming back, and he's got lactobacillus. He's got a lot of lactic acids, and yeah, well, I mean, yeah, in the winemaking, you'll use acid blends, which I think it basically three different types of acid in there: citric acid, malic acid, and tartaric acid. Um, so you use those to, in the winemaking process, because you want that lower acidity level, and it makes it more tart, and gives the wine, the character and flavor that you want. Some will call for more than others, recipe wise, but yeah, most all your winemakers will have an acid blend, instead of just a citric acid. It'll have the malic and tartaric acid along with it, and then you got tannic acid from the tannins that you're putting in as well. So um, yeah, you'll get that good tartness from that, and it's a lot safer, and that's why you can, why your wines, even your fruit wines, can keep for quite a long time. Now, a lot of your fruit wines though won't do like grapes. Not all wines get better with time. Some will mature. Even your fruit wines will require a bit of time to mature and estrify, and take care of a lot of those processes. But after a year or two or three, they start degrading, right? Depending on the fruit that's used. Whereas grapes, if kept properly, with your on its side, keeping the cork moist, it just gets better with time. So up to a point, I guess. What's going on, Scott? Good to see you, brother. Good to see you, man. Exactly. Yeah, and it's essential in winemaking. So that's why I keep acid blend, and I use acid blend for pretty much everything instead of citric acid, is because I use it a lot in my winemaking. Well, yeah, and a lot of a lot of people drink alcohols and beers and wines and stuff because a lot of the water, they didn't know about Giardia and a lot of these other microorganisms that were making them sick. They just knew that when I drink water, I get sick. When I drink beer, I get happy. Right? So, so they pretty much deducted, it's better for us to drink alcohol than it is water. So they all just drink. What's going on, Lisa? I'm thinking isotonic is what they. How you doing, Miss Lisa? Hope you're having a good weekend. What's going on, Roy? Good to see you, brother. There's Mash Brothers. Everybody checking in here. Oh, Steven, you probably told me to send out the rest of those links, didn't you? Good to see everybody trickling in here. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday night. Getting about time for a drink. That's right. So I think everybody realized back then that, drinking all this water, I get sick. Of course, there's drinking out of leaded cups and other things too. So that wasn't helping them much. I think it's funny that a lot of the kings and queens and the aristocracy, the higher ups, always drank out of the fine pewter cups that were just full of lead. That's why a lot of them were crazy in hell. So let me get these links shared and I'll be right back. See how many of these they let me. Should do my favorites first, I guess. So bear with me. Only a few more. And that should wrap it up. Good deal. Well, I got the rest of them out. Okay, looking for the term that you're talking about. It's conjugating the base, but that's not the term we're looking for, and I know what you're talking about. But the process of preparing a solution that resists changes in pH, and it's done by combining a weak acid and its conjugate base, and it's called preparing a buffer solution. But there is a more scientific term for creating it. I'm thinking it's an isotonic. No, it's not isotonic. That's equal concentrations of solutes, but that's not what I'm trying to think of. It's a cellular balance, but it's not the balance between acid and base. I can't remember what I know what you're talking about, Clint, and I can't come up with it. But anyway, When you want to create something that buffers, you have to mix an acid and the base. It's conjugate base, um, and that creates a solution that won't deviate as much in acidity or basic, or become more basic. So I'm trying to think of the term too, Clint. I can't come up with it. My mind ain't what it used to be. Yeah, scurvy. Yeah, I posted a link for that not too long ago. It was a good old grog recipe. I posted in the Militia and DIY channel. I didn't post it to the file section. It was just basically it was a video of somebody making grog and talked about it. Yep, molasses. I got you, brother. I'm behind though that much. But yeah, adding acid is important to making a buffered solution. So a lot of people think just the oyster shells alone, but getting that acidic level down a little bit below the 5.3 that we talk about that you really want to start at before you do the conversions. Get it a little bit lower, and then introduce the oyster shells, or you can add your acid, and I would think probably in the mid fours is going to be fine. 4 point doesn't have to be 4.3, 4.5, 0.7, slightly acidic, and adding that base at the same time buffers, creates a buffer. So once we start with adding some acid, so when we do put the oyster shells in there, it's going to be a perform as a good buffer. Yeah, back in the old days, water. Yeah, I don't remember. I think the recipe I called for had molasses for their grog. Going camping, awesome. Yeah, it's a tough decision, man. Switchel. Hmm. Oh, it's like a limoncello ginger beer. I need ginger switchel. Interesting. No, this isn't lemon at all. They're just putting lemons, a bunch of lemons in this one. Apple cider, lemons, and I don't know if lemons what normally would call for. Ginger and molasses or honey. What's the origin of switchel? Sounds Nordic. Let's see, origin. Nature's Gatorade, Hangmaker Punch. 17th century, America's first energy drink. Geographical, historical, from the Caribbean to the colonies. Okay. Interesting. I would have thought that it was old world, but I guess it came from the Caribbean. Interesting. The name like Switchell, I would have guessed from the old world, from the Caribbean. Interesting. Oh, really? That's sad. I wonder what it was, man. Let's see if we can research that. Cause I like to talk about, other things in here other than just when we're not talking about, making alcohol too. I like talking about canning, preserving, and any of the survival type stuff that people need to learn and keep that tradition going. Because there may be a day and time when you're not able to. You're going to have to preserve some things. Yeah, I need low acid things that don't have a lot of acid, and if they don't add vinegar or something acidic to it, it can potatoes, beets, corn, and two, since they're high altitude, just boiling doesn't. Botulism spores naturally thrive in the western U.S. Soil, and in high altitude boiling results in lower cooking temperatures, where um, you're going to have higher temperatures. 240 to 250. So yes, you add time as you go up in elevation, but you still have to reach that temperature. You just increase the time. But yeah, the most common sources of home canning related botulism cases come from foods with low acid content, such as chilies, green beans, potatoes. Oh, here we go. Beets, corn, and asparagus. So sometimes it's best to freeze that shit. Y'all be careful driving who's driving. Yep. A lot of, you can take out a lot of, it'll kill plants. Copper will kill plants and stuff. So a lot of the root, or stump removal and all that kind of stuff and treatments and stuff is high in copper. I saw something stupid online that's showing, and I guess, I don't know, people believe this stuff, but they were showing how they were wiring potatoes in a series and welding with potatoes. And I guess people are believing this shit that you can take copper and maybe silver and wire these potatoes in series and increase the voltage between them and weld with them. And people believe in that shit, you know. That's crazy. But yeah, copper, you know, copper will definitely kill plants. Yep. Yeah, I use a lot of that as well, man. I use the acid blend. Yeah, I've got chestnut tannins that I like to use. Um, I use Fermax. Yep. Potassium metabisulfate, potassium sorbate, Campton tablets, metabisulfate, pectic enzymes. Yep. Yeah, you need to have quite a few different things when you're working with wines and beers. Yeah, keeps the slugs away. I don't know. They used to have it in remember the Saint Bernards with the barrel under their chins, around their collars. No, citric acid's fine. It's just that winemakers tend to use a blend. It's called winemaker's acid blend, and it's a blend of citric acid and predominantly citric acid. And it'll have a certain percentage of malic acid and tartaric as well. Um, and it's just for getting a certain tartness and flavor in wines. Um, but no, citric acid's fine for lowering your pH, and it's cheaper than the acid blend. But because I don't want to buy both. I just buy the acid blend and use it for pretty much everything. Yeah, we want to hear about these advanced organic methodologies, man. What else you got growing? Yeah, I've grown some big tomatoes, man. Um, we use welding cages, the 4x4 metal. Um, well, now I don't, but my grandfather used to have them and roof bolts, right? He was into mining before he got into oil exploration after he got black lung. But we'd take these roof bolts and nail them into the ground and hold these big, huge tomato cages up. And man, we grew some tomato trees, man. There's big old trees. Yeah, I got it, brother. Appreciate you. I hope to. You know, Ann's taking off work, so if we don't end up going to somewhere like the Grand Canyon or somewhere, I don't know. But yeah, we should probably be there. We'll be there. And backs that'll have some flavor in it that that the just plain citric acid won't. So yeah, damn, I'm that far behind. Yeah, let me scroll on up here. Ah, you ever do much hydroponics? See a lot of outdoor hydroponic gardens with the PVC. You know, they cut into it, make little cups, and have these towers. I always thought that was pretty cool. I've always wanted to try to do some of those. Yeah, it's time to get drinking. I am too, man. I can't remember. My mind, I don't know, Clint. It's slipping. We'll figure it out. But everybody, they know what we're talking about. Yeah, I've lost a lot, man. My Ann's daughter. I almost called her my daughter-in-law, but Ann's daughter has tried some of that, and they liked it. I haven't tried it yet. But I do like well, hopefully they'll put it in a zero. That way Ann can try it too. Yeah, it's about time for a shot. See, shot. Drink some of Wes's stuff because it tastes just like mine. Oh yeah, that's getting a much better nose on it. Been a couple months. Definitely extra fine. Definitely getting good, man. Getting better. What's going on, Monty? Good to see you, brother. Hey, anytime, man. Good to see you, my man. Hope you've been doing all right. Having a good weekend. Yeah, it's I don't know. Blue lights are kind of good in one way. If they're getting somebody out of the neighborhood, it's a bad egg. That's, I guess, a good thing. It's not if you're looking in your rearview mirror, though. Drink or ice cream? Kind of hard to do both, man. I do like ice cream, and I am lactose intolerant, so I don't like a lot of the liquor creams and stuff. I think I could tolerate a few drinks. I put up with it with stomach aches because I'll just love ice cream, but they got this lacto free kind of ice cream these days. It's pretty good, but I'll put up with a little bit of stomach issue for ice cream. But a lot of the creams, I've tasted them and they're good for a drink or two. But as far as like getting hammered on them, I can't imagine, getting sick on those. It'd be horrible, horrible. So I can drink a cream or two and it's fine. I like the flavor and taste, but it's just not something I can just sit down and drink, to just put away. It's just not something I'm going to do that with. Yeah, you got to have a shot for our buddy Shadow. He should be back on here in a little bit, man. I talked to him the other day. His health is fine. He's doing fine. I was concerned it was him, but didn't go into any details with him. I let people kind of, when I heard about it, it's like, just pray for him and his family. I didn't know and still don't know what the situation is. But I figure, he'll talk to us and open up his time. I'm sure a lot of people message him and stuff, but I respect people when they're having tough times like that. I hope they understand that. I know everybody and their mothers, everybody, is everything all right? What's going on? What's going on? A lot of times people when they're having tough times like that, they, don't want to deal with a lot of that and talking about it and going over it and over and over and again and again. So if something's going on like that and I don't press, if you want to talk to me about it, open up to me because I generally won't open up to somebody until they're ready to talk to me about it because I know a lot of times that they're getting aggravated. And some of the people, I guess they'll say, well, old Santa never did contact me. And that's why, I wait until they're ready to talk. And when you are, let me know because I know, kind of a catch-22 situation. What are you going to do? So I generally let people kind of deal with those issues and then talk to them afterwards. Just give them my prayers and thoughts, and so hopefully things are okay. I'm not sure what the whole details are. I'm sure if you ask Creon, there's somebody a dozen or 5 that's messaged him. I just offered him prayers and talked to him in short, and said, I'm not sure what's going on, brother, but I'll keep you in my prayers. And he didn't go into details, so I figure when he's ready to, he will. Definitely not going to press that, but I'll have another shot for my brother. Gruel, that's a word I hadn't heard in a long time. So you got a drink before you eat. Well, I'll tell you what, old Ann can cook. She's like a chef, man. She's a really good cook. I'm pretty lucky. Yeah, saute it in wine. Yeah, make it better. What's going on, Joe? How you doing, man? Welcome to the group. If you got any questions, man, jump in there and ask. If you're curious about home distilling, want to get into it or into it already, share your experiences and ask any questions that you want. That's what we're here for. We just come in here and hang out, chat, and help a lot of people new to the hobby. Getting them started, getting them equipped properly, and get them in the right habits of doing some things that will make their hobby a lot more enjoyable. And it's nothing more frustrating getting into a hobby and seeking some help from your peers and getting misfed a lot of misinformation, and you start trying to do ferments and they turn out tasting horrible and everything just goes to shit every time you try, and you're not getting the right help from the right people, and you get frustrated and quit. That's not very good. So we try to help people out and get them on the right track and get them to making some good stuff. And had a lot of success stories. A lot of people on their first time, the first time they have ever fermented or distilled, they may, oh man, this wine is just fantastic, or this brandy is great. I can't believe how my buddies, they're all freaking out how good it is, or their first grain, first time doing, like an all grain instead of just like a sugar mash or a thin mash. So that's what we're here for, man, to help ease you over that hump, because after you do it once or twice, you're a pro. You're a pro. That's what most people, once they get a run or two under their belt, they're old hat, they're pros. They don't need any more help till they do. But it's a very good hobby. It's a lot of fun. And if you enjoy drinking, and I know I've got friends of mine that do this, don't even drink anymore. They just love the hobby so much. They do it and share it with their buddies, and, they don't even drink anymore. Right. Well, that's what they were talking about. Let me pull it up again. The Switchel, being an electrolytic drink. If that's what you're still talking about, the Switchel, they're like talking about that as the America's first energy drink, right? That's pretty cool. I guess it's got, the electrolytes and. Oh, 1981. Was that your graduation year or your birth year? That was my high school graduation year. Well, that's the best way to do it, man. You're definitely going to get the best ingredients and eat a lot more healthier that way. I'll share the experience. So, took my fiance and my daughter. We talked about that earlier to go watch the Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu or whatever his name is. It was a good show. But beforehand, we were going to go out, grab a bite to eat, So they said, "Oh, let's go to Red Robin." So we go into Red Robin, sit down, and I open up the menu, and it's like $18, $19, 16, 17, 18, $19 for a little teeny burger with fries. Now I know you get all the fries you can eat, and that doesn't even include drink. So who's going to pay 20, $60 for the three of us to eat a little something just a little bit bigger than a slider burger and a handful of fries? I'm like, no. I just got up and walked out. I mean, I hate being that bad, but like, hell no. If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I'm going to eat something good. I'm not going to spend it on a freaking burger. There's a McDonald's next here. I'm sure it's probably not as good a burger, but it's $7 each and not 20. So we went to Bob Evans and had a good old sit down and good meal for $12 each, chicken and breakfast. And, my daughter had breakfast. Me and Ann had a big chicken tenders, dinners, and fries and, coleslaw and everything for $12. So, yeah, it was a lot cheaper going there. But yeah. Oh, hell. Yeah, Joe. Yeah, we got a bunch here. What problem is you got to look at the chat on the screen. I don't know if you're on a phone. Um, but yeah, you got to look on the screen. We are cross platformed. We're in YouTube and Facebook on this software that we use for podcasting. It only allows in the chat you to see what Facebook, and most of the people are on YouTube or connect through YouTube. But that's why I post this. You can see me make it go away here on the screen here. If you're on a phone, you won't be able to see it. But if you're on a PC, it's in the live box. It's just next to me, and you can see about 3 lines of chat. So if you can follow chat there, I'm trying to get StreamYard to increase that box so people can see a little bit more of chat. But because it's cross-platform, that's the only way that you'll be able to see all the chat coming from YouTube and from other Facebook channels. So, yeah, that's the nature of the beast. That's why I try to highlight, a lot of the comments that I talk about. So, the people will see it underneath my picture, like I'm got yours highlighted. But yeah, we get probably between all the groups and all the YouTubes and everything, we'll probably get close to 100 people watching tonight. And then probably by the time it's done, get about 1,100 in the next week or so. Most of the people, 90% plus, will watch it on the way to work or listen to it on the way to work or at work or, at their leisure. A lot of people are out right now on Saturday swarping around. And if I was quite a bit younger, I probably would be too. But yeah, most of our viewers catch this later, and then a lot of times they'll have a question, they'll jump in, but kind of just listen to it at their leisure, which is fine. But if anybody has a question, you got to jump in here live and ask them. But yeah, we got quite a few here, Joe. But yeah, you got to read the chat. They're in the box here. Are you on a cell phone, Joe? Yeah, there's Clint. Yep, we're all here, but we're not all here at the same time. Yeah. But yeah, I'll try to highlight a lot of text just to help it out. But right next to Clint's, to the right of that, you'll see the last 3 lines, and you got to keep up with that. Yeah, I love to hear those stories. That's right. Yeah, egg white icing. Now I can't say that I've done a lot of icing and made that, but I do know they use like it as a finning agent too. Egg whites. It's as interesting. Something else I'm not going to do. I can either use rice hulls or just be patient. I'm just patient. Oh man, that's. Have you ever seen them grow in some of these greenhouses that are like real tall, and they have them trellised up, and it's like 30, 40 feet just hanging down, and they're on trellises and stuff, and they get up on these I guess scaffolding and stuff just to pick the tomatoes, and they got these lifts that they go up and down picking tomatoes off these huge long vines that are supported. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. Yeah, and certain varieties will do that, man. They'll just keep going and going, and you got the bush and then the vines. So they're different types for sure. Yeah, and it's great for cleaning metal if you're gonna, weld and stuff and cleaning it off. It has a lot of good commercial uses, paint thinners. I'm pretty sure Clint probably doesn't use it in his paint thinner in his car painting, but I'm sure you could. Yeah, grass killer. I use it on countertops, clean my glasses. I use it for a lot of things. We used to have an old ice cream machine when I was a kid. We used to make it. And it's been a long time ago, man. What zone am I in? I think I'm in zone 9. I am in zone. Where is it going to tell me here? Yeah. Well, damn it, they're all so small. I can't see them here. Let's see. Guess I have to click it. What's my growing zone? Yeah, I'm in growing zone, kind of between 6 and 7. Yep, between 6 and 7, zone 7, I guess. What's 9? Yeah, that's Florida in the south, Texas, California, 9. All right, brother. Have a good weekend, man. We'll see you Tuesday. We'll do. Yeah, we do. Yeah, I miss him too, man. I hope all's well. What's going on, Comedy? Oh, you got to finish the antibiotics. That's right. Yeah, you can't drink on those, man. I got you, brother. Well, hopefully you'll get them all cycled through and done. You definitely don't want to drink on them or stop using them once you start feeling a little better. You gotta. That's how they create a lot of these antibiotic resistant stuff. Is by not finishing taking them. A lot of people say, "Oh, they get started on their antibiotics and take them, and then they start feeling better. Well, I don't need them anymore. I'll save them for some other time." And that's how you create these antibiotic resistant strains of things. So anytime you get your antibiotics, make sure you finish them, regardless how you feel. No, they're not fin. They're not fish. They're Finnish from Finland, man. They're Finnish. Yeah, definitely get them taken, brother. Hope you get to feeling better too. Hell yeah, eat it, Joe's, drink it, Joe's. Best eats and drinks there is, man. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. I love hearing these stories like that, Bear Wolf. I really do, man. It's such a good hobby and it's so enjoyable and even if you don't drink, it's still a lot of fun, right? Just to be able to do it and wow people, and share it with friends and you know you can make wine and beer and sell it actually, even as a hobby income. Just report it. So, and that's awesome, brother. And it can be a good experience and it can be a bad experience. And unfortunately, a lot of that weighs on where you get your information from, and that's why we're here, and to help people out and get them on a good start. Because I know when I first started, I had nothing. There was no internet. There was nothing but a Foxfire book and maybe an old timer or two that would, give me a little bit of information, but really didn't want to talk to a kid about it, right? And so I kind of had to learn the hard way on everything, everything. I scorched the shit out of stuff and, you know, get stuck fermentations and keep adding yeast to it when it was probably, I did a lot of sugar, thin mashes with sugar and meal, which is not the best way to do it, but, in the 70s. But there wasn't a lot of information, and that's basically the way it was taught. And most of the recipes I saw was just making thin mash, cornmeal, sugar, and bread yeast, and give it a little time and put it in the pot, squirt the shit out of it, and drink it. And that's what I did, and I got better. Definitely got better over time. But for a lot of people, going to the expense of buying a decent still and investing in a lot of the tools and things necessary to do the hobby, and only to have stuck fermentations, stressed yeast and horrible flavors and, smelling, the butyric acid building up and vomit smell and all these odors coming from it. It's like, and the horrible taste that some of these, bad mashes are getting. They're just like, this sucks, man. I'm definitely better off just buying it off the shelf. Forget this, and they get frustrated and they don't understand that just a few simple things like keeping pH in check, keeping temperature in check, knowing what your gravity's, what their gravity is, and not stressing your yeast by trying to go way over the limit on sugars and yeast selection and nutrients and just a few things that you can do to take care to make sure that you got all your bases covered to make a decent ferment and to distill it out properly. Night and day difference, and there's so many little things that you can do, that cumulatively really increase a lot. Little things make small differences, but once you bundle up all these small differences, it makes a big difference, and it does. That's awesome to hear too, brother. Yeah, I've got a simple all grain step by step, and I'm gonna put some more out. And it's kind of exhaustive, and a lot of people didn't like it because it didn't structure well. Didn't use a lot of capitals and periods. I just kind of just did it step by step, and I guess it was a little hard to follow for some people. So I'm gonna have to kind of structure it one parentheses, capital, period, and break it down much better for them. Um, but I just kind of typed it the way I would speak, and that's just the way it came out. And I guess after rereading it, it's a little bit tough to follow. So I'm going to try to structure it a little better and do it a little better. But I try to explain things at the same time and maybe that's good for some, not so good for others. Maybe it's confusing some people. Um, but I'm trying to explain things as I do without getting too long winded and too, I'm not going to do a paragraph with each step. But maybe I'll just do the steps, and at the end, I'll explain why each step is done that way, or something like that would be good too. Yeah, I had my grandma. I do have some ancestors that made it, way back. My grandmother made some wines and stuff, but that was pretty much it from my grandmothers and grandfathers, the immediate family that far back. But great grandparents and great grandparents definitely, made some and traded for some. They had a dry goods store, and they definitely would trade in moonshine and for food and goods and ginseng. I told you all about the incident where they had a huge amount of ginseng got sunk during World War I and lost a lot of money. They'd stored up and saved for years and years to make that one big sale, and they lost a lot. But yeah, they on the other side they had a funeral business, and they had these embalming jars. And as soon as they get done with the embalming jars, back then jars were pretty. You didn't throw jars away; you kept jars, right? And these were the cork type, right? And they would swap them out for wine and whiskey, makers, and that was a good little business to barter with. Hell, there's probably a lot of people paid for their funerals with wine and whiskey and other things back. They had a hardware store too. It was interesting in the 1800s, reading some of the stuff that came in on the paddle boats. They'd load it off and take it into the hardware store, and people did a lot of bartering, back in the days, and they'd talk about what they traded and credits, and they'd build up credits every harvest season. They'd bring in foods and stuff, and dry goods, roots, herbs, and to the dry goods store and the root people. It was the Greers that did that, and then the Calls had the funeral home and the hardware store. But yeah, everybody bartered. It was pretty interesting. Well, it makes things better. Australian cattle dog. Those pretty good animals. Ice and salt, yeah. That's what we did. That's what I was talking about earlier. We used to make it when I was a kid, man. That reminds me of a joke, and I'm gonna have to think of it here. There was a woman that was going to go to Jerusalem on vacation, and she talked to her husband. She's getting up in age, and she said, "Well, if I were to die over there, and it cost $700 to bury me there, would you bury me there? Or if it cost $30,000 to bring me back home and bury me, would you spend the 30, or would you just spend the 700 and bury me there?" And he thought about it, and he said, "Honey, I'd spend the 30,000." And she said, "But really? Oh, that's so sweet." And he's like, "Yeah, because last time I heard, in Jerusalem, a man was buried a couple thousand years ago, and he came back from the dead, and I just can't take that chance." I thought that was a pretty good one. I got a message from somebody just now, popped up. Oh, I feel a shiner. That's cool. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, I can't take that chance. We'll bury your ass here. Oh yeah, it just keeps getting better, man. Because once you do it, you start fine tuning, and it sounds like you got pretty good background too, so and a good understanding. And I know Clint and I can't take credit for all that. So you've done some research. No, I like a zero. It's not bad. It's after I drink the zeros for a while, man. When I drink a regular, it's like, damn, that's like syrup, man. It's just they're just too sweet. Especially the Mountain Dews. But the zeros, I've gotten I've gotten used to them. I think I need a little drink, man. I'm gonna get a little frog in my throat there. Oh, Wes did it right on that, man. That's good stuff. Not as good as his blackberry, but tastes like mine. A lot of sweetness. Got a good nose on it now too. Took a little bit, but it's definitely good. But yeah, I like the zero. Been drinking a lot more of the Crystal Light and Kool-Aids, lemonades. I was drinking too many pops. I was drinking like 6 pops a day, 8 pops a day. It's too much. So I'm drinking a lot more water based, Kool-Aid. I like it Crystal Light. It's that's the pink lemonade. It's pretty tart. I don't like it as good as the raspberry lemonade. It's probably one of my favorite ones. That's pretty damn good. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I try to bring up pictures and graphs and stuff to help explain what I'm talking about. And I might do a pictorial, and might do add more pictures to my guide when I'm talking about things like that. It's a good idea. I appreciate it, Stephen. I may add some illustrations to my how tos to to help people understand. Oh, everybody does. Everybody starts out with a 5 or 10 gallon bever, 13 gallon bever, and the next thing you know, they're buying a 30 gallon copper pot, or something like that. I'm pretty happy. I've got keg stills. I've got an 18 and a half gallon bever. I got a 15 and a half gallon keg. I got a pony keg. I've got a couple 80s out there too. Not ladies, 80s. Um, but they're just, they're big. I don't want to do that much anymore. I'm hobby. So I'd probably end up selling those things, get them ready. I might weld in some ferrules in the sides and set them up for some electric and move them out. Yeah, yeah, can't. We definitely. Yeah, I don't want to sound sacrilegious, but hell sounds like a better party to me. I don't know. Probably where I'm going anyway. I've tried to be good though. I've lived a pretty good life. Things don't change though. I might not go out as good as I came in though. That's for sure. Right. I got that, but I don't know if you know it, but they use egg whites for as a finning agent for wine to help your wine, settle and sediment fast. And I've never tried that either. Yeah, I think so too. I like the shine icy. I think my mom made homemade marshmallows, and I don't. They still have that dip, the marshmallow dip. I don't remember what it was. It looked like a jar of mayonnaise, but it's marshmallow. I don't look on the shelves much. I guess they still have that. I don't know. The swamp mallow root. All right, you got me looking it up. I don't think I ever had swamp mallow. From the hibiscus or the marshmallow. Got a lot of mucilage. They were boiled and whipped into the first fluffy marshmallow confections. Well, that just makes you old as fuck, Clint, because it's like old world shit. So you were a depression baby. How in the hell? How old are you, man? I am the same, brother. That's why I can't. That's why I'm drinking Crystal Light and zeros and stuff. I'm borderline too, and got that in my family. A few other issues as well, that hereditary things. Uh, so I'm borderline. That's why it's so hard for me to get rid of this gut. I might have to do the GLP-1s to help get this off. Somebody said shots. There we go. Oh, that's 10. I'm only 5 minutes behind. That's pretty good. I'm not too far behind. Cheers. But y'all know the reason I'm sipping this, it's 140 proof. So this shit'll light you up, man. It parches my throat, but it kills them frogs too. Yeah. Yeah. And, there's a lot of people that are under the misunderstanding that glycerin is some chemical compound that, it's a naturally occurring thing. My buddy Alfredo makes a bamboo shine. And if you've never tried it, it's a very unique bamboo vodka. Um, Not shine, it's bamboo vodka, but it's very unique in that it is so smooth. You drink 100 proof and it's dangerous, really, because there's no bite. It's just so smooth. And because it's got glycerols in it, it's heavy in glycerols. There's a lot of glycerols in your bamboo, and it ferments through, and it's kind of like adding a glycerin to make it smoother. But most of the glycerin that's used is naturally occurring, and it's just sourced from plants and vegetables, right? So it's not like you're adding some toxic chemical. Oh, you've added that, but it will give you the run. So it's also something you don't want to use too much of. But a lot of people in the shine, that's cheating. You're adding chemicals to it. It's bad. But there's a lot of natural glycerols, and even in corn and stuff, and a lot of the vegetables that we use, glycerol. Hopefully, I can get a good graph on this glycerol. Yeah. It's a simple sugar alcohol. It's a natural breakdown product of triglycerides and sugar metabolism. So it's going to be natural in your ferments, but not in the levels like it is in the bamboo. And most of your ferments aren't going to have that much in it. So adding extra kind of makes it, smoother. Fermented when fruits or vegetables are fermented, e.g., wine or specific preserved vegetables, yeast and bacteria produce significantly higher levels of glycerol, typically measured in glycerol per liter, so GL. So it's just a natural part of fermentation, and a lot of the stuff that the glycerols that they add to that you get in a jar come from natural sources. I'm sure there are also some chemical conversions that are used to synthesize it, but I'd say most of it, probably pretty much most all of it, is going to be plant sourced. Yeah. However, this part, however, excessive indigestion can cause gastrointestinal discomfort like bloating or diarrhea, bubble gut. It's gonna, yeah, you can definitely, if you put too much in your liquor, you're gonna get the runs every time you drink it, which is pretty much a given. So it's a little bit like xylitol in that it's a alcohol sugar. Egg shells, that's calcium carbonate. They they use that to help buffer too. It's a lot better just to use your oyster shells if you're going to buffer. But as far as finning agent, yeah, it's the actual egg whites that they use as a finning agent. And I've seen people add it to boiling stuff too when they're cooking stuff up. Um, a lot of impurities will bond to the egg white, and so when they put that egg white in there and they'll stir it up, and a lot of impurities will stick to it, and they'll scoop it out, and it helps clear things up too. So yeah. Man, he cracked me up, man. Walters fluffy or nutter sandwiches. Oh, with the marshmallow. Well, that's something I've never heard of. Mini marshmallow fried chicken. Yeah, that 140, man. It's pretty stout. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I've got some 110 like that. Dangerous, man, when it gets that way, isn't it? It goes down too damn easy, man. It's easy just to sit and I could just, I can drink this stuff and then I can go to like an 80 proof whiskey and I can just turn up the bottle and drink it. It's like water to me now. It's nothing. I will get sick later though and get drunk all at once. It'll all hit you at once and it'll wipe you out. You get sweaty and sometimes you'll get sick and then 30 minutes later you're sober again. Yeah, there's been many nights I get drunk 2 or 3 times. Just guzzle a bunch, go through the sweats and the effects, let it hit you hard, and then another hour goes by, you're ready for another half pint or pint. I'd say you can. It's a hyacinth, so it's a plant. Pretty interesting. A marshmallow. That's where it gets its name from. Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah, marshmallow. It's a plant that grows in the marshes. They call it a marshmallow, and it's a hyacinth. Or like a hyacinth, I guess. And every part of that plant is edible. Roots, leaves, and flowers are all safe to eat. Been used for food and medicine for centuries. Pretty interesting. Used to be used in candy making a lot back in the old days too. Back in the old days when Clint was born, centuries ago. Pretty interesting. Very interesting. I'm trying to find out where it grows indigenously. Okay, it's indigenous to Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa, though it has been naturalized in parts of Eastern and Midwestern United States. It's widely grown in the region as a medicinal or ornamental herb. An herbaceous perennial. Yeah, once you see the picture of it, you'll recognize it. Definitely another one of those to learn. To add to your book. Interesting. Yeah, the hibiscus. They call that the rose mallow. And it's native to wetland here in Kentucky where I'm at. So I didn't know those old hibiscus I used to grow. Could have used the roots for the same thing. Interesting. See, we learn something on here every week. Doesn't necessarily have to be all about distilling. Hadn't had a lot of questions today, though. Yeah, it's a slow Saturday, but that's all right. We're having a good time. Oh, yeah. I don't think it's not native, but it's definitely got cousins that grow around there, and some have been brought over. Right, so it's just not indigenous to here, but it doesn't mean it doesn't grow here. It's just not a natural thing that's everywhere here, but a lot of it's been brought over. And once you Google it, once you see the plant, it will look familiar to you. You know. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way most of us are. Living check to check. Pretty much my whole life that way. I managed to save a little bit though. Managed to save up a little bit. And I never bought new trucks. You know, a lot of or big new boats. I bought used boats and used cars and And I got buddies, go out and buy a new truck, $70,000, $80,000. I'm like, man, that's all that money and payments for 5 years, $600, $700 payments for 5, 6 years. Well, why? I mean, why? Crazy. You can put that kind of money in the stock market and make a fortune. You do have two, yeah. I think probably the same ones that are here in Kentucky. The common mallow, Malva neglecta, often called cheeseweed, and then the rose mallow, Hibiscus mashrutos, native to the wetlands here in Kentucky, and the hibiscus hollyhock, related ornamental plant that share the same muscalignus, mucilignus. Oh, it's for congestion and soothing properties. If you want to purchase and view true marshmallow plants, check with specialized local nurseries such as the Udell Botanical Gardens in Crestwood, Kentucky. They have a bunch there that has the real marshmallow that Clint's talking about. Good to know. Man, at my age, having the internet at your fingers is just such a wonder, man. As a kid, I loved the encyclopedias, and that's basically all we had when we were young like that is World Book encyclopedias and a couple other, brands of encyclopedias with lots of pictures and stuff. But, people just don't appreciate the internet for what it is, man. There's so much information at your fingertips. It's just unbelievable, the change. And it's like having the Library of Congress plus, 10 times at your fingertips. What's going on, Justin? Good to see you, brother. Just chilling, brother. What are you up to? Seashore mallow. Cool. Yeah. Okra. I'm sure old Damon would love that. What's going on, Matt? Good to see you, brother. Yep, that's right. On patrol, man, they go through a lot of shit, don't they? Man, I've never really felt sorry for cops until I started watching shows like that and see all the shit they have to put up with, man, and just with the kids, even taunting them. It's like people are just daring them to do something so they can sue the shit out of them these days, trying to get them to violate one of their rights so they can sue them. It's tough. I don't think. I don't think I could handle that job. I'd definitely be beating some fools. I wouldn't. I wouldn't be a. I couldn't put up with that, man. All that taunting and all getting up in your face, all these little punks. Oh man, I couldn't deal with that. Could not. But the bright side is, if you're caught, man, they'll just take your badge away. If it was one of us did that, man, we'd sit in jail for a few years, right? That ain't right. But That's that. That's exactly right, man. I agree. I agree. There are a few bad eggs out there that are, Barney Fife's power hungry, got picked on as a kid, got a chip on their shoulder. But, for every one of those, there's hundreds of good cops. So, and it's that way with everything, man. It's always the bad apples that spoil it, and most cops are good. They dedicate their lives to trying to protect and serve and doing the right thing, but yeah, yeah, especially if it's wrong, right? So if they come up and you're just not doing anything, let me see an ID. You know, I don't care if I mean, I'm a law abiding citizen and stuff, except for what I do here, the shine. But it's like I'm going to ask them, what's your reasoning for wanting my identification? I mean, this is Nazi Germany. I'm just not going to hand over my ID just because you want it. There are a lot of them that get I don't know. It's like, do they get a bonus for every ID they get, for every background check they can run? I guess looking for old warrants or something to run you in for. It's like, no, you don't get that without a reason. But, you know your rights. It's important to know your rights and to stand by your rights and be principled. That's, you know, but at the same time, if you're driving and license and registration, pretty much got to show your license and registration. That's part of driving. You have to prove that you're able to drive. They ask you to get out of the car, get out of the car. You may not like it, but the Supreme Court backs it, for their safety and for any purpose that they want, they can get you out of the car. So now, as far as passengers and other things, that's a different story, but I'm not an attorney, but I will, go along and be cool is to a point, but at the same time, I'm going to, exercise my rights as well. Right, right, exactly. Yep, yeah, they back the brothers, they back each other, and a lot of times it's out of fear of retribution, and from higher ups. So if you do the right thing and say something, it's going to cost you. No good deed goes unpunished. So that hinders a lot too. It's going to be harder to go into the you know, to work and to the locker rooms and whatever, when you do turn in a brother like that, it's a brotherhood. And so, but yeah, it's, you got to do the right thing, man. And it seems like is one of my most frustrating, if I was a cop, one of the most frustrating things for me would be to put my life on the line and bring in some of these hardened criminals and just have them, judges and attorneys and prosecutors just slap them on the wrist, and next thing you know, you're seeing them back out on the street doing the same shit. That would be very frustrating for me, putting my life on the line and then, you know, seeing them right back out there, That's a tough job though, man. Definitely respect them for, and I can understand too, especially in certain areas, small town cops, getting all paranoid, pulling guns. It's like, man, no cops have ever been killed in this town before. When I was in college, I got pulled over for accelerating too fast, and I was pulling out, and it is a big curve, and a car was coming around the curve pretty quickly. So I had to punch it, so I didn't create an accident, because the car, by the time I looked back and pulled out, it was there, right? So I accelerated. I might have barked a little bit of tires, but had a cop with a boner, man. He had to prove his shit. So he pulls me over and reads me the right act. And I'm like, bro, just write your fucking ticket, man. You're not my daddy. I don't want to hear you shit. If you're going to write a ticket, write a ticket. And, him wanting to shake me down and everything. I'm like, this is a traffic stop. And him went, I don't know, you might be hiding a weapon. I'm like, when is the last time a cop has ever been harmed in this town, if ever? And I don't think ever. I don't think a cop had ever been, harmed, in that town. I'm like, it's just, what you think I'm a college student? I'm just going to whip out a, Smith and Wesson and drop you right here in the campus parking lot. Get real, bro. You're not, this isn't Chicago. This isn't big city here. This is small town Kentucky. You know, I don't know where the fuck you come from, but it ain't here. And I don't mind talking to them like that. I stand up for myself, but else I'm not going to be an asshole either, unless I feel that I'm, unjustly being, harassed, or they're trying to, gaslight me, antagonize me, and get me going. Yeah, yeah. Most of the cops here are okay. I've out of all the times I've been pulled over and gone in for DUIs and PIs and all that, most all of them were pretty good, decent. Only a couple. I've had some threaten me and all that, and me and a buddy of mine got pulled over, and we'd pulled in. I guess we were getting ready to go to the movies. We had some liquors, and we were going to mix a drink and get a little buzz before we went in to watch movies. I can't remember what it was. So we pulled over and we were going to mix the drinks and drink them real quick. And here comes the cops, and we're hiding. We didn't get a chance to mix them. We're hiding the bottle and hiding everything. Hey, Tammy, how you doing? Hope you're feeling better, dear. So, they two cops. So one of them pulls Rocco out and he takes him to the other side in the car and talking to him. The other one pulls me over and pulls me out and talking to me, and I'm standing up for my rights. Hell, we're just going to the movies, man. I don't know. Well, this building's been broken into. How do I know you're not? I'm like, how do you know I am? Do I look like I'm prepared to break into a place? And so we're getting ready to go to the movies. Pulled over here. I thought I heard, my car was making a funny noise, so I pulled over here so I could hear it and listen to it, and the other cop, heard me saying that, and he walked back here and he's like, it is making an odd noise, and I'm like, there it is. That's what I was hearing. It's not something I'm used to hearing. So I pulled over and was listening to what it was. We're not breaking in here. We're going to the movies. And I guess Rocco told the other cop the same story. So, and this cop, just kept, trying to aggro me and get me worked up. And I'm like, you're not going to talk to me like that. I'll shove you under that effing car if I want to. And I'm like, bring it on. We'll see about that. Bring your ass the fuck on, homie. And so we bet go at it. And his partner came over and decelerated him, and so anyway, went back and told my old man about it. And I'm like, we got roused by the cop. Dude threatened to just shove me into the car and shit. And my dad's, what? And I'm like, yeah. And so, of course, he calls downtown the station and like, oh, I can't imagine him doing that. He's one of the finest officers and all that, so, but he was a bad cop. His partner was a great guy, but I don't know if they're playing good cop, bad cop, but that dude was bad, DUI on foot. That's crazy, man. I had a lot of PIs, though. Had a lot of PIs when I was growing up. Imagine that, huh? And my DUIs were under the old law before computers and way back in the 70s and early 80s. Yeah, this dude was he was definitely a fired up individual. He was all probably on steroids or something. He was all pumped up on something. He's ready to. He was ready to fight. I was ready too. I was in pretty fit shape then. That was back when I played football, so I was in top condition. I don't think he could have shoved me under that car. Trying to think of the term they use. De-escalate. That's what I'm looking for. He was definitely escalating. He was trying to get me going. Hope you're having a good weekend, Tammy. Yeah, but they try to escalate. They always try to escalate stuff and get things going. And, but most good cops don't. We need more good cops, and we need a lot of investigations and stuff. And the worst thing about bad cops, other than how they treat individuals, is the money they cost the townships and the cities that they operate in. With all these $1 million lawsuits and hundreds of thousands of dollars lawsuits you hear every day, it's costing their townships and their towns and cities a lot of money, and that's not right for the taxpayers as well. So when they see they got a bad cop, they need to put it on a sheet, and he needs to have a rap sheet just like everybody else. And that way, whenever he tries to get hired somewhere else, they can pull that rap sheet up and say, oh, no, this is a bad egg. Every city he's gone to, he's caused us issues. He caused $1 million lawsuit here, 100,000 here. He's been found guilty of assault, and lost his badge here, and a lot of towns and places will hire him, because they don't have that, I guess, data sheet. But yeah, they should keep better record on them as well. I'm doing great. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're talking about old times and our run-ins with the laws growing up, and good cops and bad cops. Yeah, it is. Let's have another shot. Yeah, most all the cops I've come into contact with have been good people, and doing their job right. I come from a family of attorneys, so I know it when I know my rights. Yeah, I've been coached and what to say and not to say. The worst thing you can do is talk too much. Because they're fishing. Anytime they pull you, they're fishing. Always fishing. Always. This is what they're taught to do. Because everybody's guilty of something. They just got to figure out what it is, right? And that's where a lot of them are. I think they're taught that in the academy as well. Everybody's guilty of something. Just fish till you figure out what it is. Get that ID so you can do the background, see what they've been guilty of, and see if they're guilty of it again. And yeah. But it's good to know your rights and stand up for them, because if you don't, we'll lose them. That doesn't mean to be an asshole to them either. Be respectful, but just respectfully decline. I mean, they can ask you for an ID. You don't have to give it to them unless they have reasonable, articulate suspicion that you've created a crime or about to, right? So, they can ask. They can lie to you as well. So don't that's part of the game. So, but be respectful. Don't be an ass. Unless you're just fishing for a lawsuit, then but it sure looks better, in front of the judge if you're not being an ass and you get roused than if you're deserving, right? Because the judge will be like, well, had you not been such a smart ass, I'd probably awarded you this, but you kind of had it coming, so sorry. you know. Yeah, there's some states that are stopping ID, so also know your laws. Yeah, some states are stopping ID, so anytime you get stopped and they ask you for an ID, you have to show it to them. So know your laws in your state. Yep, good point. But I think that should be a national thing. I don't think it should vary state by state like that. What's going on, Dougster? How you doing, brother? Everybody rolling in after they're swarping on Saturday, getting home early because they don't want to get pulled over. Yeah, nothing worse than going out and drinking on certain days, New Year's. That's just amateur day. Don't go out and get drunk on New Year's. Bad day to do it. I know. And you know what? It seems like the further north you go in Michigan, the cheaper it gets too. Yeah, I do too. Especially on New Year's, where if I'm going to go out, I'm going to be sober or have a sober driver. It's moonshine's not much. It's basically a clear whiskey. It has a reputation of, and it can be high proof. That's another thing that most of your whiskeys, 100, 110, 130 barrel proof or something like that, maybe, and that'll be your limits. But a lot of times moonshine was sold high proof, or it was made a lot with a high sugar content, which made it have a lot of bite and fire, which makes you kind of feel like it's higher proof than it actually is. So, like some 100 proof sugar shine can taste like it's 140 proof, but some good smooth 140 proof will actually be smoother and less fire and bite and less feel going down than that 100 proof sugar. So it just, but yeah, it's gotten a reputation for high proof and a lot of fire and burn going all the way down. And that's because, it's a lot of the ways it was made in the past was high sugar content, like I used to do, cornmeal and sugar and bread yeast. Boom, 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 done. Cornmeal flavored, had the bite, had an okay corn flavor, had a little bite to it. It was okay. But once you get a good grain conversion or a good brandy, but especially like a good grain conversion, it's really smooth, and after it ages and matures, it gets even better. But yeah, if you don't drink a lot, it's still a fun hobby. I got, like we were talking earlier, I got a lot of friends that love making wine and beer and moonshine and whiskey and gins and vodkas, and they don't even drink. They just enjoyed making it and sampling it and sharing it with friends, but they don't drink any of it. They just taste it to see if the spice is right, like in a gin or whatever, and that's it. And then they share it with their buddies and friends and family, and yeah, yeah. And they're going to take, well, when you don't do the tests, they say, well, you're just admitting guilt if you don't. Well, that's fine. They can take your license away for 6 months, and that's pretty much what they do. But if you blow and blow over, which you're going to do anyway, it can be a lot worse. So, you know, but once you do one test, I think that's all you're obligated to do in a lot of states. So if they give you that little blow test and you blow under and they take you in, they say, well, I think you have more. Let's run you by the hospital and get a blood test. No, No, yeah, you've done your test. You've obligated to, so just say no to more than one. Mendocino County, California. Yes, that's Northern Cali. That's right. I've heard about them Mendocino boys up here. We talked about that. They got some good grain up there. Really good stuff. Trees. Back in the 70s and 80s, some of the best weed in America came from there. There, Kentucky, and Hawaii were three of the best places you could get it and grow it. Really good, perfect climates for it. Catfish, yum. Yeah, man. I've seen some of the trees, man. They got them raised beds and just huge freaking 20-foot, 30-foot plants, man. Just huge trees up there, man. Massive. It's a different world now, Noah. Yeah, it's everything's grown indoors, small plants, little clones, little autos, a bunch of small plants and high THC. They bred a lot of the other chemicals out of it, kind of ruined it, really. Uh, yeah, yeah, it's different now than it used to be. But I grew on the riverbank in that good sandy, loamy soil, and it loved it. It flooded, every few years, and it would just get so nutrient rich when it'd flood, and yeah, you could grow some trees on the riverbanks on the big sandy river. We used to have trees. You'd take your friends down there. I want to see your plants, man. You'd walk around there looking for them, and well, I don't see them. I'm like, and they'd look, oh, God damn. They'd look up and see them. They're like, holy shit, man, that's like a tree. They were expecting like little evergreen Christmas trees, everything down low. I had it pruned at the bottom branches all pruned up, man. They was like, didn't start branching until 6 foot up, man. Everybody's looking around this way. It's like, they're like, holy shit. I didn't even see that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, man. The outdoor stuff, the buzz, I don't know, back in the old days, the buzz would last a lot longer. The indoor stuff always had a pretty good intense buzz, but it's short lived. Whereas the outdoor stuff maybe might not have been as intense, but the buzz were always much, much larger and the buzz would last much longer, whereas the indoor just didn't last as long. And it also got you get burnt out on the indoor stuff, kind of get a immunity to the indoor stuff a lot quicker than the outdoor stuff as well. That's right. That's right. Yeah, you're going to lose your license for the same term, but they can't. It's nothing proved on your record. It's just a refuse to test. But as long as you do the blow test, and it's like, okay, I know you're drinking, but this is 0.67. You're just under the limit. We're going to take you in and do another test. And then you just smile and say, nope, I did all I'm going to do, and you hope they have that camera on so you can prove it. But I think all police forces should use the camera. And that's not only for evidence against bad cops, but it's for their safety as well. So, and evidence in court. Because I've seen a lot of videos and stuff, and I've been guilty of this. So you see this video put out by civilians and people that are involved and friends of the suspects and stuff, and they make this video and they edit it, and it only starts when the cops are getting riled and getting ready to beat you down. And, it shows, the cops getting aggressive. Oh, he's bullying me, whipped him with his billy club and beat him down. Oh my God, I can't believe he did that. He's horrible. And that's because that's the only video you see. And then you see the cop video of the 10-minute altercation before that, where that guy took the first swing or, did all these things to antagonize and escalate, and then took a shot at the cop or kicked the cop or, punched the cop or did something like that. And then the cop beat him down. It's like, oh, so now I see why that happened, right? So you see the other part of the story. So I don't just watch the videos anymore and just go on those, because there's always a lot more that you didn't see that happened before leading up to that. Cool. Oh yeah, man. I've been growing since I was a kid, man. About the same time I started shining, I started growing weed, man. It's pretty young. Is it 1 year there? I think it's 6 months here too. Yeah. Failure to test is a lower fine, and same pretty much the same, lose your license, and insurance wise it might make a difference as well. Might make a difference on your insurance. But yeah, if as long as you take a breathalyzer, you don't have to take the blood test. There's nothing that they can do. You're only obligated to take one test. I'm pretty sure that's national. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an attorney, but I know here that's the case. You're only obligated to take, one sobriety test, and that doesn't include the field sobriety. So the field sobriety, touch nose, that doesn't count. I'm talking about breathalyzer versus taking blood. If you blow in the breathalyzer, you don't have to do the blood test in my state. Now, it's definitely, and that's one thing I think that a lot of laws. I mean, I understand, how our country's set up and state laws and stuff, but I think for the sake of the citizens, I think most laws should be pretty much applied throughout the country. I think having different gun laws everywhere is a bunch of bullshit. Our Second Amendment gives us the right, so it shouldn't vary state by state whether you can have a large capacity or not. That all should be protected, and that's what they're trying to get done now. But in the past, it's always been that way. Same thing with drinking DUI levels. Some places it's 0.6, 0.7. Some places it's 0.10, 1.0. So it varies, state by state, you know, concealed carry versus constitutional carry versus open carry, state by state. I think all these things should be pretty much streamlined. That way, you know the basics. And if you know the law, it should apply to most states, you know. Yeah, they can ask you to do it. I looked it up. No, you're generally not obligated to take any of them. Like physical roadside tests, like walk and turn, one head leg stand, and they're voluntary. And rules will be dependent on the state. Roadside tests not legally required. Breath tests are usually voluntary. Declining it carries civil penalties like license suspension in certain states. Chemical test. Right. So, definitely know your state laws. But the breath test, preliminary breath tests are usually voluntary. It's the breathalyzer handheld by the road. But from my knowledge, if you take that voluntarily and you pass it, I don't think you're obligated to do the mandatory. Now, this one, chemical test, breath, blood, or urine, mandatory by implied consent. Once you have been formally arrested, state implied consent laws usually obligate you to take an official chemical test. Refusing this test at the police station could lead to automatic severe penalty, including immediately license suspension, and use of your refusal will be held against you in court. But then again, like we said, if you know that you're going to register drunk, it's better to just say no and deal with the penalties for saying no as opposed to the penalties of saying yes and being proven. Because I don't think they're going to be any more severe. But I think once you take the preliminary voluntary test, I think that's your obligation has been satisfied. You've already taken a test. So, but that's going to vary. If you were to take a sip of store-bought moonshine, do you think it would find it up to your quality? That really depends on the brand. A lot of the moonshine in the stores are sugar shines. It's cheap, it's easy to make, it's you know, but a lot of them are decent quality shines. But moonshine is basically a term used for untaxed liquor. Um, Moonshine can be a gin, it can be a vodka, it can be a white dog whiskey, it can be aged on oak and look like regular whiskey. It can be, so many different distillates, right? It could be a rum. It's just an untaxed liquor. So, it doesn't bind it to a certain formulation or recipe like a corn liquor. A lot of people do consider, moonshine to be a corn liquor, but moonshine is just an untaxed liquor. Most commonly, is a corn liquor because corn, it's the cheapest to get. That's the cheapest source of sugars there is. It's even cheaper than buying sugar. So that's why a lot of your ethanol for fuels are made with corns, is because that's the cheapest source of and cheapest source of sugar that you can get to make ethanol. So it would depend, but a white dog whiskey made with corn and grains um, is going to be fairly compatible with what you can get in the store. A store is going to be less crafty and it's going to be on a larger scale. But there are some craft distillers that make moonshine that make perfectly good shine that sell it on the store shelves. So, it's going to be hit and miss. It's going to be, I know growing up it's still out there, Georgia Moon. And I grew up in an area that people made a lot of moonshine. I made moonshine, and I can tell you without any doubt at all, the moonshine that came locally was better than a Georgia Moon. But that's 50 years ago, 40 some years ago. Fast forward to today, there's a lot of good craft distillers that are making moonshine that make a decent product, and so it's becoming more and more closer and closer to authentic and good. But it definitely depends on the individual and the craftsman that's making it, and the ingredients that are used and the practices used to make it. Yeah, I mean, you have to have a different book of laws for each state you go through, man. It is crazy. I don't think it should be that way. But I think there's some Clint that, and Clint would admit that there's some out there that are decent, that are made, good grain conversions, that are made by craft distillers in small batches and small stills, kind of like what we do. I mean, I've seen some at some of the festivals and stuff I go to. I know one here in Kentucky that has a 30-gallon still. He's a commercial distiller and he has a 30-gallon still. I mean, that's just a couple $1,000 copper steel that he's got. And, I know a lot of hobby distillers that have bigger stills than he does. And, he makes it, uses the same recipes, it's just as a license instead, and that's the only difference. He makes it using the same recipes, the same practices, the same enzymes and corn that we use, and it tastes very comparable to what we have. But that's not your typical commercial setup either. He's more of a craft distiller versus a production. He's not going to get rich doing his product that way. And a lot of commercial distillers cut corners it's an economic choice. Sometimes you have to cut some corners to increase your productivity and profit. It's all about business, right? So some distillers are more conscious about profits than quality. And some, like this guy, man, he makes good stuff as good as Castle and Key. And they're make great bourbons and whiskeys and stuff. And they were at the same festival, and his was just as good as theirs. His White Dog was just as good as theirs. But, or better maybe. I think Roger and I both agreed his was better. And, I talked to the guy and he's like, yeah, I'm using a 30-gallon still. And it's like, wow. I could set you up for something a little better, man. But it was he was cranking out good stuff and bottling it up and selling it. He's not going to have the marketing. He doesn't have the distribution. You're not going to probably be able to buy it on your shelves. But there are some out there. They are, but they're few and far between. But Sugarlands and all that. Some of these master distiller stuff that come out, you can get some pretty decent, unique, products that are different. You're right, and they're okay. They're pretty good. Uh, but just your standard Georgia Moon type shine that you're getting from a lot of these places not going to be all that great. Um, Buffalo Trace White Dog, it's basically their liquor that comes off the tap, and it's before it goes into a barrel. You have the option of buying it. And it's got some heads and tails in it, which is intended for aging. So some people don't find it all that great, but I'm sure it would age well. Um, but yeah, it's going to be hit and miss. Yeah, here we got constitutional carry. You can carry them any way you want to, open, concealed, however the hell you want to. And that's why I think all states should be constitutional carry. You know, unless of course, you've got a record, and then you're gonna forfeit the rights. But there's been a lot of contesting that too. Just because you have a felony doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to have a gun. Now if you have a felony for armed robbery or manslaughter with a gun, yeah, we're going to limit your ability to have a gun. But if you have a felony because you fraudulently took money from somebody or something like that, or embezzled money from the bank you worked at, or some felony for something that totally unrelated to violence or guns or anything like that, I don't necessarily think that you should forfeit your gun rights just because you got caught with your hand in the cash register, right? So I think I think the Supreme Court's having a look at that too, because it's just, there's a difference. Yeah, you got to try different ones. You just do. Um, some that I've tried were pretty good. I thought that Nick Calo's peanut butter, I haven't tried a lot of them, so, I can't really say, but the ones I've tried, I think Nick Calo's peanut butter and banana shine or whatever was unique and different. I've tried quite a few different ones that were unique and good. Trying to think of some of the other ones that I've tried here. Hmm. There's been some pretty unique ones. Trying to think of some of them. I know, like Justin Meredith. He sent me some taco shine, and he's on Master Distiller. He made the brisket shine, and that taco shine was very, very unique. It was probably, it tastes like you basically eating a taco. You tasted the meat, you tasted the shell, you tasted the spice. Very, very cool. And I guess he had fat wash and had mixed it, and it was clear, and used infusions with spices and stuff, and it was taco-y. And I tell you what, that would make some of the best Bloody Mary mix ever. But it was good alone too. So I didn't want, when I told him, I like, man, this is great for Bloody Marys, but at the same time, it's a good standalone. So when he comes out with that, but there's a lot of unique things that they've done on Master Distiller that would make some of those shines unique. And I've heard a lot of people. I've tried the trying to think of the macadamia nut, that they do that was decent. I think that's Mark and Digger's macadamia nut one that tasted okay and it was unique and different. But just the plain ones off the shelf that are just basically sugar shines or sugar washes, anybody can make those, and they're nothing special. Yeah, yeah, and Georgia Moon's okay until you taste good shine, and not the best cuts, and it's okay. It's pretty much probably a neutral vodka when it's made, and with sugar. I'm sure it was made with a lot of sugar or corn and refined the hell out of. I didn't get much corn flavor out of it when I drank it, but it was okay until I drank the local stuff, and it just, compared to the local stuff, nobody bought it there. It just sat on the shelves. Right. And I like that macadamia that they had. It was the nutty macadamia was good. Yeah, and not all moonshine's good. You should taste the first shit I ever made. It was horrible. I mean, it's you couldn't find that on any shelf that bad. I may take you up on that, brother. I want some of the old stuff though. I don't want some of this new stuff that, they've bred it for such we were talking about earlier, like, you know, growing your yeast and acclimating yeast and selectively breeding yeast. They've done the same thing with marijuana, and they've strained, crossbred and selectively bred, and they bred it for such high THC, getting that high THC content. And at the same time, they've kind of selectively bred a lot of the other chemicals and compounds out of it that I think used to contribute heavily to the buzz, not just CDBs, but a lot of other compounds as well that I feel used to contribute to the buzz. And now it's really high THC, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But, you know, it's gotten to the point where it's just almost too concentrated. And I just like a mellow buzz. be able to smoke a big fatty and, have a good high and feel good and get squinty eyed and relaxed and feel mellow. But now, this stuff's just so strong. It just, kind of nauseates me, makes me anxious, and it's just not the same. So maybe it's just me getting old or whatever. I don't know. But used to, it was a lot different. And I think they bred a lot of the stuff out that made us feel that, that mellow, easy going high. Now it's just like, it's intense, and I've done shatter and a lot of the concentrates and stuff. And it's too much. I remember the first time I did shatter and concentrates, I got lost going home, man. I'd lived in the area for 20 years and I got lost. It was in the same neighborhood I'd been driving for 20 years and I wasn't even recognizing shit, right? I was fucked up. But it's just really strong. Yeah. Yeah, they had that glitch to make it smoothing it out. And I don't like it when they add a lot. I mean, a little bit. I'd rather get it from the corn. There's glycerols in your corn, and so if you can get it from that makes a good smooth. But adding more, yeah, yeah. Nick Kalo, yeah, he's a good guy. And that if you like peanut butter, that peanut butter shine he has good. I've got some over here. It's pretty good. And there's some of them, just buy small jars and try them and experiment and see what you like. There's so many out there, and there's some good brandies out there, um, but there's so many that aren't that great, right? The hazelnut, yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. The hazelnut, yeah, that I think that's pretty. It's decent. It's okay. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And Georgia Moon, it may be different now. Last time I drank Georgia Moon was probably 81, 82 ish around, well, not 80, 81, 82 around in there. So it'd been a long time since I've had it. They may have changed the way they make it or adapted a little bit. And that's the way I feel when I smoke just regular stuff anymore, man. It's like 30, 40% THC. And it's just like, it's just too much. It's not like the old days, passed a big fatty around and just getting a good mellow buzz. Now it's like two hits and I'm fried, and it's just too intense. I just like the mellow buzz. Yeah. Yeah. And I've done a lot of those too, the vapes and stuff. And it's like, you do a hit or two and it's like edibles. It's like kind of sneaks up on you a little bit. And before you know it, it's like, damn, I wish I didn't hit that last vape. And next thing you know, it's like kind of getting uneasy, stomach feeling, a little anxious, butterflies in your stomach feeling, and it just doesn't feel the same. But I'm sure it's a lot of the chemical, compounds too. They've selectively bred it, um, and created so many hybrid strains just to increase that specific thing. Selective, like we're talking about yeast, training your yeast to be tolerant of acids or be tolerant of alcohol, higher alcohol content. They've done the same thing with marijuana. They bred it to increase that THC content. And as you increase that, you're going to lose other things. And I think some of the other compounds that have lost would have good medicinal values, because just the new stuff alone, it doesn't make me feel good. Back in the old days, in the 70s, 80s, it was 6, 8 10, maybe 12, 14 for some of your better weeds. And that was basically what we were smoking. And then I guess in the Netherlands, they started creating some crossbreeds, and I guess Hawaii, probably some of the Hawaiian blue and the Hilo homegrown maybe got up to 16, 18% back in the day. And that was just the primo, and Mendocino, got some probably up there as well. And, but in the Netherlands, they started doing a lot of breeding and crossbreeding and creating a lot of hybrids and a lot of different breeds, and selectively breeding it for specific qualities. And I think they just kind of got out of hand. And supposedly there's a seed bank, so they've got seeds from back in the old days, so they can grow, some of that old stuff again. And it'd be pretty interesting to see, what chemical compounds are in that versus what's in the modern stuff. Because I know as THCA and all that increases, other compounds are going to be decreasing. So, yeah. Yeah, they've definitely taken it to a different level. But back in the old days, man, it was pretty low. And then I guess some of your early Netherlands stuff probably, came into the high 18s to the low 20s. And then since then, man, since the 90s, it's just kind of exploded. And now they've got it 30, 40%, off the plant, without even concentrating it, crazy. Well, I don't think it was done just for medicinal. I think they did it because it's just like a lot of moonshiners do and a lot of distillers do when they first get into it. They want to make high proof. The higher proof, the better. Got to get that high proof. That high proof. How do I get my proof higher, man? I want to get that high proof, man. I got to have that high proof. And it's all fixated, tunnel vision on high proof, because to them that's a stepping stone. The higher proof you can get, that's better, right? Higher proof's better, right? It's higher, it's better. And you find out that not necessarily higher proof doesn't make necessarily better. It makes a neutral without flavor, and it it doesn't taste the same, and it doesn't have the same effect, and and it's different. So I think that it's the same thing in the industry. Oh, we got to get higher THC, higher. It's competition, so you can get the highest and the strongest. And in the meantime, they missed out on a lot of flavor, a lot of other compounds, that may have had better medicinal purposes, for like PTSD. You definitely don't want to give somebody with PTSD the stuff I've been smoking, high THC content that makes me anxious. Is that what you want to give to somebody with PTSD? No, you want to give them something to mellow them out, right? Make them feel good like the old stuff did. And it's just not, you're not going to get that in some of the modern stuff. There was a lady in Arizona who was doing a lot of research in the late 90s and early 2000s that was doing a lot of research on different strains and how it affected people, and testing on a lot of military vets for their PTSD, and was doing a lot of good work with medicine. And it was before, they kind of opened up their eyes and got out of the pharmaceutical pocket and realized that there's a lot of good things that can be done with marijuana. And I think it took some congressional personal problems. I think maybe some people in Congress had loved ones that were, cured or treated with medical marijuana that helped them. They saw, maybe had some nieces or, nephews or sisters and brothers that took care of some of their seizures and problems like that. And they're like, oh, wow, that actually does help. That's helping them. Wow. They're not tearing their livers up with all these pharmaceutical drugs. They're not having seizures like they once did. It's like a cure. So until it affects them personally, it's just a drug. We're all out here smoking it to get high, and they don't see the value of it until it hits them at home. And then I think, that's happening enough, and they're starting to see empirical evidence that there is medicinal purposes. So it's opened up some eyes, and then they've made a lot of changes since then. But yeah, back in the day, it's my dad, man, back when I was a kid, he looked at it like it's heroin or LSD or something. That's just the reefer madness kind of, you know, kind of messed your mind up, made you crazy, and it's just, he had no idea. And it's, yeah, it doesn't. It's all very strong, skunky smelling nowadays. Used to, you got a different florals. Oh, I used to smoke the shit out of it. I don't need more. It don't make me feel good. Are they, Bear? Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't smell the same. It doesn't buzz you the same. And I mean, I can smell it a mile away when people are smoking it. It smells like the old skunk weed back in the day, skunk number one and all that. And, but all of it smells kind of that way these days. Most everything I've done, I've had all these strains, all these different ones, and they all smell a lot alike. But I used to smoke it all the time, but it doesn't make me feel good. So what's the use in buying it and smoking it? If it don't make you feel good, forget about it. I don't grow it anymore or nothing. I would like to get some old seeds and try them out and and see if I could get them to grow. They're probably dried up. I don't know. Maybe some place will had some old strains that, you know, 8-10% just to test. Oh yeah, I bet the woman in Arizona. Anyway, she was doing a lot of good research on it, and this is back in the day before they really opened up their eyes, and they basically ended the research. Federal government said, we're ending this research if you continue employing this lady doing this research. We're going to pull your federal dollars. So the lady lost her job, and of course, they had to fold to keep getting the money coming in. But it is in Arizona, and a lot of good research was lost. Hopefully, she's gone back at it since then. But she had done a lot of good research, and that's what needs to be done. Because there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of compounds, a lot of chemicals in that that can be synthesized and used. Unfortunately, pharmaceuticals have blocked it. They can't patent it. They tried to synthesize it and patent that, and they created a marijuana that could actually kill you with the synthetic marijuana. People died from that. Never happened with the natural stuff, but with that synthetic weed, it wasn't the same. So yeah, I mean, I can smell it every time I go to Walmart, man. I smell it on people, a mile away. It all smells the same these days. Get behind cars in traffic, you can smell it, and it's just like it all smells skunky. Yep. All right, so well, it's 11:30. We talked about distilling and marijuana and pharmaceutical issues. We're going the gamut. I enjoy talking about it, man. It's something that I'm definitely glad to see the day, but I never realized, I never thought I dreamed to see the day where, marijuana would be recreationally legal, and distilling still not. I definitely growing up, I thought, it'd be a lot quicker, man, be able to make his own liquor than it will buy weed at a store. How wrong was I? But I don't think it's going to be too far. I think it's going to, home distilling is going to follow pretty much the same path marijuana has. Um, and it already really kind of is. There's some states that have made it legal to do at home in certain amounts, but it's still federally illegal. And that's the same thing with, marijuana. They did reclassify it, which is great. Appreciate the Trump administration for that, and getting it reclassified and making medicine with it. But yeah, that's a big plus. But anyway, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hope everybody has a good weekend. We'll tune back in Tuesday and pick up where we left off. Hopefully, get some more beginners in here asking some questions and can help some people with the craft. And I need to work on that little how-to, and I'll follow your advice and maybe put some pictures in there with it as well, because I like using a lot of pictures and graphs, and I didn't include that with it, so I'll definitely do that and try to make it a little better. But everybody have a great Saturday night. I have to have me another little sippy sip of that, man. That's good stuff old West made. But we'll see you cats on Tuesday. Let's see what day that'll be. The 16th. Till then, everybody have a great weekend. Shine on, stay safe. Love you. See you Tuesday. Peace out.